It's 4 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. We have a lot to get through with what's new in ArcGIS Enterprise. Real quick before we get started, I'm Shannon Kaliski. I'm one of the product managers for ArcGIS Enterprise. Down here in the audience, we have Philip Heede. He is another product manager for ArcGIS Enterprise. Up here with me, I have Melanie Summers. She works on the ArcGIS Pro team. And we have Shreyas.
I am not a product manager.
He is not a product manager. He does amazing development work on ArcGIS Enterprise, and he'll be showing us portal-to-portal collaboration behind the scenes, not just what you saw in the plenary from him earlier. Okay, let's get started. The first and probably most noticeable thing that is new with ArcGIS Enterprise is the name. ArcGIS for Server is not the name anymore. We have rebranded to ArcGIS Enterprise. But more than being just a rebranding, we've added new capabilities, new functions, and continue to improve the features that you've already been using. So in a little bit, once I go through some of these new features, we'll take a look at the new website so that you can get acquainted with kind of what the personality of ArcGIS Enterprise is going to be, and also find helpful resources and get used to the whole Esri rebranding as well. Okay, so things that are not quite new, but have a new spin on them, are software components of ArcGIS Enterprise. If you were in the session that Philip gave earlier today on introducing, you saw that ArcGIS Server is not going anywhere. It is still here. It is one of the main software components of ArcGIS Enterprise. Also is Portal. These are, again, nothing new. It's still there. It's part of ArcGIS Enterprise. And also our data store and web adapter. These are all the software components that make up Enterprise, and they're not new, but the way you think about them is. So no longer do you want to talk about just server and portal. What you're going to want to be talking about is what's called the base ArcGIS Enterprise deployment. The base deployment is simply the 4 software components that you've configured together. You can put those on a single machine, multiple machines. They can be on premises, either physical or virtual, or in the cloud. And we provide OMIs for that. We provide cloud builders. We could provide ways that you can make that cloud deployment easier. Also new in ArcGIS Enterprise is the concept of server roles. If you've been in any of the sessions on Enterprise so far, you've probably heard these, and you definitely saw them in the plenary this morning. At 10.5, once you've established your base ArcGIS Enterprise deployment, meaning you took those 4 software components and you configured them together to make a web GIS, you can start adding server roles to them. These all build off of that ArcGIS Server core component. So from that one component, you have the 5 licensing roles. There's GIS Server, Image Server, GeoEvent, GeoAnalytics, and Business Analyst Server. So let's take a closer look. GIS Server, this is nothing new. This is the server that you've been working with. This is the original server role. Whenever you are purchasing ArcGIS Enterprise for the first time, the GIS Server that's in there is going to be the GIS Server role. You can't switch that with another one. You have to use GIS Server, and the idea is use that to support your hosting server. You can also allow it to do double duty if you have smaller deployments and still use it for traditional map service serving and that sort of thing. But definitely something to keep in mind on how your deployment will scale over time. Image Server is not new. It previously was an extension, now is a server role. What is new with it is the raster analytics capability. You saw this demoed in the plenary, and so I won't go into it too much right now, but that is one of the server roles that you can add on to your ArcGIS Enterprise. Likewise, GeoEvent is another server extension turned server role. This is for doing real-time analysis of streaming data. You can aggregate on the fly and do all of the things that you could do with your GeoEvent extensions, but now in a server role capacity. GeoAnalytics is brand new. You've seen this be presented and demoed at the 2016 Esri UC, as well as today in the plenary. GeoAnalytics is designed for handling massive data sets, whether that is data sets that are simply too big for a standalone desktop, or data sets that are very, very large And the way it works, like the Raster Analytics component of Image Server, is it uses the distributed analysis and storage to accelerate jobs. That way you can do the work that you are trying to get done faster and solve problems never before possible. And lastly is Business Analyst Server. Business Analyst Server has been around in several iterations, but for the first time, the modernized Business Analyst Online is available completely in your own infrastructure. So if you're building business intelligence and you want to bring the geo-enrichment and the rich Esri tools to it, you now can. Now I know that was very quick into our server roles. Part of the reason it was so quick is because we were doing, you've seen those sessions before, and so now I want to show you something you might not be aware of. So let's jump to, there we go. All right, this is the new ArcGIS Enterprise website. You'll notice that we've modernized from where what we had before. We were long overdue for it. You can find case studies here, so if you need to understand how other users are using the product. You can see key features. Oops. You can also get what you get, but what I really want you to focus on is this resources section. Here you can easily find the minimum system requirements for deploying ArcGIS Enterprise, steps to upgrade to the latest version, and also our new streamlined functionality matrix. This document breaks down everything you need to know about ArcGIS Enterprise, from the server capabilities available for each of the server roles, to the service types that you can use, to the hosted layer types each service can provide, to the content available, and even the extensions. We go on to show you which databases and file share connections you can connect to, how we support open standards in the cloud, as well as some touching on security, and then also licensing, how the new named users are working, and how many you get for which level of ArcGIS Enterprise you purchase. So speaking of named users, let's jump back to our presentation and look at what's new. So prior to 10.5, we had one named user. This named user is now your level 2 named user. Level 2 named users can administer content, they can administer the portal, they can be in groups, they can do everything that your users have been able to do in the past. You can create custom roles for them, you can assign privileges. But new at 10.5 is the level 1 named user. Members that are assigned to level 1 are viewer only. They cannot own any content, they cannot create new content. However, they do differ from anonymous users in the sense that you can add them to groups, they have an identity in Portal, so when you are creating these products within your organization, you don't need a level 2 for every single person, especially if they're just going to be viewing maps and needing to be part of groups and being able to have access to data. That's the concept behind a level 1 named user. So that was our rapid crash course on everything that has been covered in the other ArcGIS Enterprise sessions. So if you need more information on that, I really encourage you to check out the recordings that will be available from the Dev Summit, and then also check out the new, any of the other ArcGIS Enterprise sessions that are happening throughout the Dev Summit. So now let's take a look at some of the nuts and bolts of what we've improved with GIS Server. No applause at all? We're putting the arc into ArcMap for the first time. You can actually publish a true curve, not a series of tiny little segments segmented out, truly a curve. It's amazing. Thank you. I am so excited about that. That's why there's no frills, nothing. It's just true curves. Geodatabases. So we talk a lot about the ArcGIS data store. And obviously that's very important in your base deployment because at 10.5, you need that to be your hosting server, or registered with your hosting server as your managed data store. But geodatabases aren't going away. In fact, we're continuing to make improvements on this front because it is so essential to what GIS servers do. So you can now create database views and register those, which will improve your map performance. And you also have the ability to create metadata for these views. There on the side, you can see some other ways that we've made improvements to overall geodatabases, including raster stores, improvements for SQL Server and Postgres. And last of what I consider the big three functionalities when you think of classic GIS, which is mapping, where we had the true curves, geodatabase management, and lastly, geocoding. We've improved geocoding as well. You can now batch geocode with a new geocoding tools service through the REST API. So this is an asynchronous batch geocode, and the output is written to your portal as either a hosted feature service or as file items. Okay, so we've covered the crash course of what is ArcGIS Enterprise. We've covered what's new in the nuts and bolts of GIS Server. But what about setup and configuration? A lot of users have communicated to us that that's the part where they get really confused. Installing the software, that's easy. You go, you download it, install, excellent. Configuration, that's the hard part. Now what do we do? Well, we're working to improve that experience for you guys as well. So new at 10.5, we've created a data store configuration wizard. Within ArcGIS Enterprise, you have 3 data store types. You have the relational data store, which is really what you can think of your classic database type. You have tile cache, which though the name might make you think of raster caches, don't. It's for 3D data. Lastly, we have the spatiotemporal data store to store your big data. And so GeoEvent and GeoAnalytics Server can both utilize the spatiotemporal data store. At 10.5, we have a wizard that can walk you through how to configure this. You can configure your data store as a single type, so just relational, just spatiotemporal, or just tile cache, or you can combine data store types. One thing to keep in mind when you're doing this, however, is what you will be using the data store as. We do not recommend that you combine the spatiotemporal data store with any other data store type. Reason being is that the amount of transactions back and forth would really use up your system resources, and we want to avoid that. So as a best practice, really focus on workload separation wherever you can, and keep your data stores separate. Next is the ArcGIS Python API. You saw in the plenary many powerful ways you can use this, and we wanted to remind you of it here. You can automate and script ArcGIS, including ArcGIS Enterprise, using the ArcGIS Python API. You can perform spatial analysis straight from the Python API. You can update content in your portal. You can script administrative tools. You can clone users. You can do a lot of the tasks that you've been asking, how can I do this easily? How can I do this in a way that I can document and that it's repeatable? And one really great way to do that is through this Python API. So now we've seen a lot of we've heard a lot of nuts and bolts. So let's take a look at what's new in Portal by actually going to it. So what you'll first want to look at is in the Server tab, you will see options for adding each of the new server role types. So GeoAnalytics, what you do here is you simply select which federated server is your GeoAnalytics server. Raster analysis, to enable that, you simply pick which server from your federated list of servers is your image server. And it's that simple to get started with adding server roles to your base deployment. As part of your base deployment setup, you should have already selected which of your servers is your hosting server. So that's nothing new there. We talked about the level 1 and level 2 named users. Here in roles, you can see what is the minimum level for each of the built-in roles. Not mentioned, but also new, is that viewer role. Yes, the level 1 role can only have viewer privileges, but I didn't mention that that's a new built-in role that you can assign users to. You can set it as your default role, so as you're onboarding large amount of users, you can really streamline that process and make it easier for you. You can set what's the default level for new members as they come in. You can determine if you want your users to come in automatically as a level 2 or as a level 1, and we've continued the ability for you to select what their default role is. A little later, Shreyas will walk you through portal-to-portal collaboration. But here you can see in your portal where you would find the settings. This is where you would accept invitations or create your own. So now let's look at what's new in the map viewer itself. Oops, let me switch to a different one that will go a little faster. There we go. Okay, so new in the map viewer. This portal has both Image Server and GeoAnalytics Server, and has both raster analysis and GeoAnalytics configured within the portal. You see the image servers there right away because there's a new raster analysis tool. But when you click on feature analysis, you see you have your classic standard tools, but also the GeoAnalytics tools available to you. So you can go through and do things like you saw in the demo, aggregate points, reconstruct tracks, summarize your data, or even just copy it to your data store. In adding layers, we've added the ability for you within your portal to search ArcGIS online. So if you were looking, say, for City of Austin Police, oh, not within the map area. There we go. You can see that you can now bring that in to your portal. Mentioned in the plenary was also the ability to browse Living Atlas data. Where you would enable that in your portal, forgot to show you that. Nope. Philip, where am I going real quick? Online? Yes, that is where I'm going. Thank you. All right, this is why we're a team. We all help each other out. All right, configure Living Atlas content. Here is where you enable allowing Living Atlas content in your portal, and then you set up what level of access people will be able to see. If you would like the people in your organization to be able to use premium content and use credits, you can enable that option. Or if you simply want to be able to set just the subscriber content, you can do that as well. Then you have the option to browse all the Living Atlas layers, bring them into your organization, and start to use them in your maps and apps. From within your portal, we've also added the ability for you to jump to key applications. This button right here will allow you to jump to apps such as Insights directly from your portal. And because Insights uses ArcGIS Enterprise behind the scenes, all of the abilities that you have within your portal you can bring to Insights. So you can be able to open new workbooks. So you can see I've created one here, but we'll make a new one just so we can see where it goes in our portal. We can add data from my content, from our organization, from Excel and databases. So we'll just leave this empty for now. Oops. Cool. Insights, what are you doing? Oh, I'm searching for one. Ha, there we go. So here we go. We can open a workbook and start working. Change the name to demo, and we're good. Save, and when we return to our portal and we check our content, you will be able to see that the new demo Insights workbook has been added as an item. We've also added several other Insights supporting item types to portal. And once you have an item, oops, let's go back. Once you have an item created, you can go to the new item description pages to get more information about it. So here, with an Insights workbook, there's limited information. But if we were to pick something else, say a web feature service, which you can now publish through ArcGIS Enterprise, through the portal, you can add more information. You can edit and view your metadata and do other work with that. So that's a quick look at what we have in ArcGIS Enterprise and what's new in Portal. Remember that Portal is a component of ArcGIS Enterprise. And while I showed you a few things, there are many, many more that we just simply do not have time to get to today. But if you check out that new website in our resources and documentation, you'll be able to find a complete list of everything that's new in Portal. We already took our tour of what's new. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shreyas to show you a behind the scenes of portal-to-portal collaboration.
Thank you, Shannon. How many of you saw the plenary on portal-to-portal collaboration? How many of you actually remember what we demoed in the portal-to-portal collaboration? Cool, okay. So what I'm going to do is sort of peel the layers a little bit on portal-to-portal collaboration and give you an inside view of what's really happening. Not use the browser at all, but talk through slides and actually tell you what's really happening so that you can take that information to where you really want it to apply. So the first part of setting up portal-to-portal collaboration is to establish trust. In this case, you've agreed between the two IT administrators between your portals that you need to get into a collaboration and a trust needs to be established between the two portals. So the first part is you identify one of the portals to be the collaboration host. Now, a collaboration host is the portal that initiates a collaboration. So you go into your organization settings and you start to create a collaboration. Only an administrator can do that. Once you've initiated a collaboration, you have to invite the other portal into your collaboration as a guest organization. And that invitation is downloaded and then emailed or sent securely to the IT administrator of the guest organization. So the IT administrator of the guest organization logs into their portal and they accept the invitation to join and become a part of the collaboration. The response as a part of the acknowledgement must be sent back to the IT administrator of the originating portal or the collaboration host. Once that is done, the IT administrator accepts that acknowledgement and this completes the circle of trust. So the response invitation and the response files actually contain certificate information that is used to authenticate when the two portals need to collaborate with each other. So what are prerequisites and what are the features of establishing trust? Well, the first and foremost is that there must be some HTTP connectivity between the two portals. One of the questions that comes up is, what if there isn't a connectivity between the two portals? I'm sorry to say there is no collaboration. Okay? So you need to have HTTP connectivity. Another note on a security aspect is you never are required to exchange your IT administrative credentials between portals. That's why the notion of downloading files and sending them securely via email or some other secure means. We never want you to exchange administrative credentials with departmental portals. In the invitation and the response files actually are embedded PKI style keys, public keys actually. And these keys are then used to generate or exchange for collaboration tokens when time comes to exchange content. No accounts need to be created specifically for collaboration. So it does not eat into your licensed users at all. There is no special account that's been created under the hoods. And collaboration does work with portals that have web tier authentication. just that when you have web tier authentications, the web tier authentications need to be provided when you configure collaboration. The only caveat here is for IWA, only NTLM works at 10.5. It does not work with Kerberos. And that's because Kerberos requires a central ticketing system to which both portals need to have physical access and connectivity. So IWA only works with NTLM with web tier authentication. And of course, web tier authentication with PKI will continue to work with the exchange of certificates. So when you create collaborations, if you have web tier authentications between your portals, all you have to do is input the web tier credentials. The next step is actually linking your collaboration workspaces inside your collaboration to a physical group. Now, a collaboration workspace is, you can think of a collaboration workspace as a means to organize your content as a project or a theme within a collaboration. Now, once you have that, you need to physically link a collaboration to a group in your portal, because that's where the content is going to be received, and that's the place from which content is actually synchronized if it's going out to a different portal. So when you create a collaboration, a default workspace is created for you. All you have to do is link it to a group. So on the guest, a guest can decide if they want to connect a specific group, an existing group, or a new group that's created for a collaboration. And likewise on the host needs to connect it to one specific group. There is no need that the two group names be identical or similar. You can have your own project themes within each portal. So a little more about collaboration. So as you can see in this diagram, we have 4 portals and they are coming together in a trusted collaboration. Each has one or more groups, but they are linking a group to a collaboration workspace. And each can have a different access mode. Some can send content, some can receive content, and some can send and receive content at the same time. So there is at least one. You can have more than one collaboration workspace in your collaboration. And it's associated with a project or a theme, as I've said before. It's a way to organize your content between, within a collaboration. And the access mode is defined per collaboration workspace, which is you can have one collaboration with the same department. In today's example, we use the transportation department and the public works department. In one workspace, you can have the public works department sending content to the transportation department. In the second workspace, you can have transportation department sending content to the public works department. You can have a third workspace where both are sharing and receiving content at the same time. You don't need to create multiple collaborations. All of it can fit into one collaboration. The next thing that I want to talk a little bit about is synchronization. So when the collaboration is set up, you have a trusted relationship and we have enough identities to communicate and exchange content. So the first thing that the synchronization engine does, it tries to find what items need to be synchronized. And it packages them into a serialized format. It's an internal format that's used for transmission only. It's not available for you to download. And that package is sent to the destination over that HTTP protocol, over the HTTP connection. On the destination side, the package is extracted and items are unpacked and imported back into the portal. If some content needs to be received back by the portal, the synchronization engine is going to ask these items to be packaged from the destination. It's going to ask them to package it again and import it back into their own portal. So a few more notes on synchronization. Only items that are modified or missing are synchronized. So it's not that the engine is constantly keeping them in sync. Only if an item is modified or updated, or if it's missing from a portal, will it be synchronized. So it's not a very chatty operation. It's not very chatty. You can schedule a synchronization. You can say, well, I would like the contents to be synchronized at midnight when there is low volume of activity that's happening on my portals. And you can say, well, I would like it to happen every day at midnight, or you could say, I would like it to happen once every week, on a Sunday night or a Saturday night when it's downtime for you. And all of the magic of collaboration is that item IDs are maintained across portals. So the item, and a web map that was in a portal A has an item, ID 1. It's the same ID when it's collaborated. And that's precisely the reason why your maps and applications seamlessly work when they are exchanged, because the item IDs are not changed and they can be referenced uniquely within portals. Any type of portal item can be shared to a collaboration, starting from layers to web maps, to apps, to dashboards, and so forth. At 10.5, when you exchange or when you share your layers through a collaboration, the collaboration is going to reference the original source layer. No copy of data is made at 10.5. Now, this is an important point to understand, which is you still need to have access. The portal needs to have access to the actual services, GIS services, that are being referenced in your maps. And this works very well when you have an organization or a single identity provider that's binding the multiple portals together. Otherwise, you will have to grant access, an identity, or create accounts for the destination portal to have access to your items. And lastly, I wanted to say that all of collaboration itself, creating a collaboration, inviting participants, setting up workspaces, linking groups, is all a RESTful API that can be scripted and automated. Now, this will be very useful if you want to write a small script that runs at a particular interval of time, that collaborates two portals together and synchronizes content. With that, I'll hand it back to Shannon. Thank you.
Thank you, Shreyas. Okay, changing gears. We have hopefully made the point that there's a lot of new features and a lot of powerful features in ArcGIS Enterprise. But ArcGIS Enterprise doesn't stand alone. The true power really comes in when you combine it with desktop, in this case, ArcGIS Pro. So I'm going to turn it over to Melanie to walk us through some demos of how you can publish to ArcGIS Enterprise from Pro.
Hi, can you guys hear me? Can I make the same joke as Shannon did earlier? No? Okay. Okay, so how many of you work with Pro? Impressive. How many of you publish and share from Pro? Okay. How many of you do that from ArcMap? Most of you. Cool. Okay, so this is Pro. Welcome. Next generation of desktop. I'm going to show you some of the new functionality that you can get by sharing from ArcGIS Pro to ArcGIS Enterprise specifically. So here I have a map, and if you're not too familiar with projections, this is not Web Mercator. Yes, I know, it's very exciting, isn't it? So this map I'm going to share as a vector tile layer. And new from Pro 1.4, we can share vector tile layers in any projection that you want. So you're not limited to the Web Mercator projection or the ArcGIS Online Google Maps tiling scheme. So we've also included an easy-to-use sharing interface for sharing vector tile layers at 1.4. You're no longer dependent on the GP tools. So from the sharing ribbon here, as you can see, Pro is contextual. If you're not used to it, I promise, it's easy to use. I've gone ahead and shared my map as a new web layer. I'm going to choose to copy my data, and my layer type that I'm choosing is vector tile. Now, you can see here that these, the options that I'm choosing are very specific to what I'm sharing to ArcGIS Enterprise. When we're sharing from Pro, we're creating an item in your portal and publishing a service to your federated server. So we talk about things in terms of those portal items, specifically here a vector tile layer, but that map image layer item is going to actually be publishing a dynamic map service. So depending on the layer item, you're going to get different services published to your federated server. Back to the vector tile, under configuration, you'll see here that it auto-suggested a tiling scheme for me. You can see that it's using World Code for me, but whatever coordinate system my map was in, Pro will create a tiling scheme for me on the fly, or I can pull one in from an existing service or tiling scheme file. I'll go ahead and analyze. And then I'll click publish. So this is creating that item and publishing that service for me within my ArcGIS Enterprise deployment. Now I'm told that people don't trust smoke and mirrors, so we're gonna let this one go through and we'll come back to it because it will take a little bit. So one of the things you may be wondering is why bother with a vector tile layer? So vector tile layers, as opposed to raster tile layers, are really lightweight. They're really fast, both to publish and to interact with. They're highly scalable. So if you have viral maps, these are going to be great in terms of performance for everyone accessing them. Because it is vector data, you can modify your symbology and have multiple versions of the same service that look slightly differently. So if I wanted to change, one of my soil regions to a different color, I can point to the same service but have two different versions of that, even though it's tiled data. So while that goes, a couple other really nice things with sharing from Pro. You can have multiple jobs at once. So this has started, but in just a second, we're going to start talking about another web layer that we can create from Pro. And I can have those publishing at the same time. So it's not a one job, wait, and then continue. You can also close Pro while it's processing, and it'll continue on the back end. That's really great for large caching jobs. Okay, so we're going to let that continue, and then we'll come back and look at what it actually is like to interact with. So one of the new things that you can do in Pro is with query layers specifically. You can add parameters to your query layers. So here you can see that I'm sourcing from my Oracle database. And when I go in and look at that source, you can see that it is a query layer. And I've copied my query into Notepad. Hopefully that's a little bit more legible for you guys. So what I'm doing here is I'm joining my weather stations with rainfall data coming from a table. And there's two pieces that are happening here. The first one is that I'm computing an average. So I'm computing an average rainfall. Specifically, I'm computing an average rainfall within a time range. So I'm going to be able to dynamically compute the average rainfall within a specified amount of time. So this is completely new to all desktop products for us, for query layers. And the really cool thing is that you can then share this as a map image layer, which is publishing a map service, and consume that throughout the platform so that you can see, your rolling averages. What happens, if I change that span of time that I'm interacting with to actually visualize that. So it's join data between my points and my rainfall data that's coming from a table. And then you can see I have the time slider here, and as I change this, you can see that my average that I'm actually symbolizing off of changes. So to share that, I'll go ahead and once again share my map as a web layer. And this time I'm going to choose to reference my registered data. So my Oracle database is registered with my GIS server. So that map service is going to dynamically update as I make changes to my data. And then under content here, you can see that it's adding that map image layer item. If I had multiple federated servers, I could choose which one I was sharing to. Again, I'll click Analyze, and I'll click Publish. I did that earlier, didn't I? Okay, so while that's going, we'll hop back over to the job status pane. Now here you can see that my vector tile layer successfully published. So I'm connected to my portal. I'll click that URL. It's gonna open up the item details page of the layer item I just created. This is what happens when you install Portal on your laptop. Not a recommended deployment. Okay, so I'll go ahead and open up that vector tile layer. And again, so because that tiling scheme doesn't match the topographic base map, it's going to end up replacing it. And there it is. So you can see as I zoom in and pan around, the visualization is really quick. It happens really nice and quickly. One of the cool things that that happens is as you rotate your map, you can see those labels kind of rotate with you. So from within Pro, I'm going to go to my project pane here, and under Portal, because we've really put a lot of effort into integrating your ArcGIS Enterprise with Pro to make it seamless and really easy to pull things across, I'm just going to grab my vector tile layer. I'm going to add that to a new map. And we'll zoom in again. And so here I'm holding down the V key so I can rotate my map, and you'll see that as I do that, my labels are actually staying legible for me. So that's because it's a vector tile. So it's cached, but it's still dynamic in that sense. Okay, so vector tile. Coming back to that query layer that we had published, again, so that same time slider experience that we had in Pro is maintained in my map image layer. And you can see that maintained there. So those are a couple of the new web layer types or web layer functionalities that we have when sharing from Pro. We've also at 1.4 added the ability to share web tools, which is the portal item that exposes your geoprocessing service. So here I have a map where I have the yellow dots are my power outages in the Houston area, and I've done a hotspot analysis to see where new power outages have occurred. I have a model here that runs through and selects which addresses within a given area have experienced power outages. And then it pulls in a Python script that utilizes Python 3.0, which we support at Pro 1.4, and outputs PDF mailers for each of those addresses. So because I've successfully run this tool, if I go to the Share tab, I can click Share as Web Tool and select that model that I had created. Yes, I will switch. Now, I already went ahead and shared this as a web map, so that, because I'm going to pull all of this into a web application in just a moment. Let's take a look at sharing this web tool. So if I could make some changes to the capabilities parameters. We're continuing to add and grow which capabilities and parameters we support throughout web layers, web maps, and web tools that we share from Pro. You could add additional tools if you wanted to. Again, I'll analyze, and I'll go ahead and share that. So for the sake of brevity, I've already pulled this into Web App Builder. So I created a web map that has that same reference data for me. I've added as a widget my geoprocessing tool. And then let's zoom into an area that I know has some new hotspots. And I'll just draw my area of interest here. I'll click execute. And what this is going to do is just like it would have done in Pro, it's going to add a new layer that has the addresses that have experienced new hotspots. And it has also given me a downloadable zip file, which contains a PDF mailer for every one of those addresses. So you can see that I apparently don't have Adobe Reader on my laptop, but also here's my PDF mailer for that address. So we also at 1.4 support sharing locators, and we're continuing to expand the web layers and web layer functionality that you can share from ArcGIS Pro.
Thank you, Melanie. So the reason that we spent so much time looking at Pro is to really hammer home the point that Enterprise doesn't stand alone. That you can, by publishing from desktop to Enterprise, you really make it useful. And whether or not you might be using it, then someone in your team might be. So it's good to be able to understand what you can do and how you can take the most advantage of the power of Enterprise from desktop. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Philip to talk a little bit about GeoAnalytics Server and the Raster Analytics capability of Image Server, which is new at 10.5.
All right, thanks, Jan. So first I want to just re-emphasize how cool I think that demo was that Melanie just showed. The idea that you can do your parameterized query layers and on the fly calculate changes to something that's published through a dynamic map service, that's brand new. That's not something you were ever able to do with ArcMap. And quite frankly, that's one of the things that I think is the most interesting within ArcGIS Enterprise 10.5 and the classic core GIS server capabilities. So definitely take a look at that and try to figure out how to make use of it within your applications to do new cool things. What I want to talk about now is two of those new server capabilities, the GeoAnalytics Server and then Image Server with Raster Analytics in just a second. You saw both of these things demoed in the plenary this morning, but we wanted here in the What's New session to just give a very quick taste of what those really represent and why we built them and how they fit into the overall platform. Fundamentally, GeoAnalytics is not about replacing something in ArcGIS Enterprise or the ArcGIS platform. It's about adding new capabilities we didn't have before. So GeoAnalytics sits on top of the existing geoprocessing framework. Those 800 different GP tools, some of those that Melanie just showed us in her demo, all of those are the underpinnings of our full analysis framework. What we did with GeoAnalytics was take about a dozen or so of those tools and implemented them in a new distributed computing architecture under the hood along with the requisite storage. So we can take and process massive amounts of data that we weren't able to before. A key part of the story is also that GeoAnalytics doesn't simply process the data and now give you a result that you have to take and move along, do an ETL in order to further process or visualize. This is part of the whole system, so your results from GeoAnalytics is automatically made available as a service and a layer within the overall system. There's no additional publishing step. As soon as the analysis finishes, that result is immediately available as an item, a layer that you can add to your maps, consume in all of your applications. It's just a feature service underneath. So GeoAnalytics comes with about a dozen or so tools at 10.5. These are the core tools that we looked at were necessary to perform the kinds of aggregation in particular, but certainly also other things like create space-time cube that we saw in Lauren's demo earlier today. When you work with large data sets, one of the first steps is typically burning down that haystack to find those needles that are buried somewhere. That's a lot of what the analysis tools are all about. GeoAnalytics is available through any number of different user interfaces, primarily ArcGIS Pro, the premier desktop client. So you as GIS analysts, desktop users, can immediately process and work with much larger data sets than you ever were able to before, but also within web browsers. Personally, I find it a little bit disconcerting to work with 100 million records from within a browser-based application, but you can do that. For you as developers, the really important thing to also know is that all of these tools are available as a GP service. These are just web tools that you can also add into your web app builder application using the GP widget like Melanie just did, or your own custom applications built on top of the JavaScript API or any of the runtime SDKs. Anything you have already built today that knows how to talk to GP services can make use of GeoAnalytics. Instead of spending a whole lot of time going through every single part of GeoAnalytics right now, I want to bring your attention to this session on Thursday morning that goes into all the nuts and bolts. I believe it's Mike and Sarah from the development team who work with GeoAnalytics. They will talk all about what's going on under the hood. So if you're even remotely interested, I strongly encourage you to go to that session. We also wanted to touch on Image Server and specifically the new raster analysis capabilities. Just like GeoAnalytics is about processing massive amounts of vector and tabular data, Image Server and the raster analysis tools is about being able to process massive amounts of pixels, your rasters and images, whether they're large geographies, high resolution, or simply large collections of imagery. Image Server also adds to existing ArcGIS concepts. If you're familiar with image extension from either desktop or the image extension for server in the past, you know all about the rich set of raster functions and the raster models that you can use or create with those functions. We added a bunch of new powerful analytics, and again, we did it in a modern distributed computing architecture. So you can distribute those analyses across many different cores. Vinay in his demo this morning showed you running on 200 cores in order to process 100 billion pixels in just over an hour. That's something that you frankly just were not able to reasonably do with the old tools. And again, when that analysis finishes, there's no additional processing required. You don't need to ETL your data out, copy files around, and now publish out image services or create new mosaic data sets. The result of that processing is immediately exposed as a new image service within the overall system. So it's a very fast, efficient way to do your processing, and once it's done, you can now take those images and use them within your applications to visualize and do additional on-the-fly processing using all those raster function tools. So to recap with raster analytics, it's about running processing against data that's too big for a single desktop. And there can be lots of reasons for why data is too big. And it's up to you to define what you consider too big. It may not be impossible to do today, but it just may take longer than you want it to. Raster analysis can still help you out there. So you can go from months or weeks down to days, hours, or even minutes. This is the same story for both GeoAnalytics and raster analytics. And it's really important to understand that you don't necessarily have to have hundreds of billions of records or hundreds of billions of pixels to process. As long as it's something that's too big for what you have today, you can make use of these tools and gain benefit from it. So for raster analysis, I want to just go through a couple of case studies to really hammer home the point of how fast some of this stuff is. We had a case study with terrain suitability, where we took the global SRTM data, defined a processing model on it in order to create a global terrain suitability raster. So this is large because it's the entire globe. It's not super high resolution, but even 90-meter data across the globe gets pretty big. We did a couple of different iterations on this on just a single virtual machine running on the Esri virtual machine network. And as Melanie can attest to, it's not always the fastest. Shreyas is sitting here, yes. Those VMs are not high powered, But a single VM with 16 virtual cores can still be very, very powerful. You can go from 13 hours down to an hour and a half. That's the difference between this did not finish today, I'll come back and see the result tomorrow, to now it's done before lunch on a single machine. Another case study was solar power plant suitability, where we took 4 different data sets and again defined our raster processing model. In this case, it's not global, but it's US, but it's slightly higher resolution, 30 meter. This is something you could also do with ArcMap or Pro. In this case, on our machine, we used ArcGIS Pro and it took just under 6 hours. And again, that's not completely unreasonable, but 6 hours is still, I kick it off in the morning and not too long before I hopefully go home, I get a result. If something needs to be tweaked, I have to kick it off again and come back to the next day. Using raster analysis, this time running on a cloud infrastructure with 8 machines, not terribly big, 8 virtual CPUs, 16 gigs of RAM, but 8 of those, we could do the same thing in 9 minutes. 6 hours to 9 minutes is again the difference between I'll have to come back tomorrow to I can keep doing this all day long, just tweaking my settings until I get exactly what I needed. And finally, we had the example with Landsat processing, where we used completely different sized infrastructure. In this case, we took one gigantic box on Amazon. And in this case, I have to remember 32 cores, 60 gigs of RAM, so it's not even that big, but decent sized. We took a large collection of imagery. There's, how many scenes are there? 7,422 scenes. In this case, we're storing all that data natively in AWS S3, cheap, reliable cloud storage. There's an Amazon S3 joke in there. But we didn't have to move that data around. We defined our processing chain to process all of these individual rasters, all 7,400, one at a time, to create a new derived output. Just under 3 hours, which comes out to 360 billion pixels processed in 3 hours. That's something that's tangible and worth looking at. So if you have any kind of raster processing or vector and tabular processing needs that are simply not fast enough today, please take a look at GeoAnalytics. For GeoAnalytics specifically, come to the session on Thursday morning at, I think it was 10:30. All right. I think that rounds us out for now. The science of where. Thanks, guys. Everybody, we appreciate you coming in. We have plenty of more sessions.